Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me for today's video where we are finally going to be playing my mythology-based reading game, which I am super excited about. I am a little bit nervous for this game because a lot of mythology-based books, inspired books, are usually on the longer side, so I'm wondering how long it's actually going to take me to finish this game. I guess we're going to find out. I have probably made this game into the most complicated game I have ever made, so I'm hoping this is going to work well, but we won't know until we start playing. So let me go ahead and tell you the rules of this game. So first up, this is our game board. It has a lot of little dragons on it, and then you may not be able to see this on camera, but this is our little path that we are going to go around, and once we hit the finish line, that means we are done with the game. Now, the tokens that are going to fill in the path, there are 3 of them, and depending on what token we land on, it changes the way we will choose a book. So the first token is the dragon wheel token, and I'll put up a bigger version on one of the sides. If we land on this token, we have to pull a little origami token out of this adorable bag that has a little dragon sitting on books. And we would just pull one just like this. And these are example of my origami dragons. Some turned out better than others. Anyway, each dragon has a little number on one of its feet. I don't know if this will focus. So that's a number 5. And each number is going to correspond to a specific mythology, whether that's Egyptian or Roman. Then we will have a wheel that we pull up that has 10 books based on or inspired by that mythology. You'll spin the wheel. Whatever book the wheel lands on is the book we'll read for that turn. So that's the simplest prompt out of all 3 and the one that I have the least control over. Our next token is the Mystic Mail token. And if I land on the Mystic Mail token, I grab this little, it's actually a book sleeve, but it's going to work for this game. I grab this little book sleeve, and inside there are these little origami packages that have a prompt inside. So we'll open the package, take out the prompt, and I have to read a book based on that prompt. It can be inspired by any type of mythology. So a little bit more control over these books, but some of the prompts could be difficult to find a book that fits. And then the last token is the most difficult of the 3, and that's the Oracle card token. And if I land on this token, I have to first draw a Oracle card, which has a prompt on the back. And then I have to draw 2 dragons out of the origami dragon bag. And then I have to find a book that fits the prompt as well as whatever one of the mythology dragon choices is. So for example, if I pulled Celtic and Egyptian mythology, I have to find a book that fits the prompt and either fits in the Celtic or Egyptian inspired mythology. Hopefully that will make more sense once we actually get to the game. All right, so I think that's it for the explanation of the rules, and I think it's time to set up our game board, get our tokens on, and then we'll go ahead and do our first roll and see how this game is going to go. All right. Here goes nothing. All right, so first up, we are going to put our tokens on the board, which are in this mug. I'm just going to place them randomly, and we'll see how the game board looks afterwards. All right, so here's our game board. This is what it looks like. We got our cute little dragons that my mom made sitting on a bookshelf, and we got our pathway to the finish line. So let's go ahead, do our first roll, and really hope for the best. All right, as usual, we'll be using a 8-sided die. Just realized we missed 1 token. All right, now we're officially complete. All right, here we go. Roll number 1. It is a 1. Of course it is. This game is going to go like my June TBR. All right, we'll just lie him down here, hanging out on the Mystic Mail token. All right, so we landed on the Mystic Mail token, which I'm not that upset about because this is the easiest way, I think, for me to get books on my TBR read during this game because it's just a prompt and it's not based on any certain mythology. So if I have a prompt that fits one of my TBR books, that would be amazing. All right, like I said before, our Mystic Mail packages are in this little book sleeve. So let's go ahead and pull one and see what prompt we're starting the game out with. All right, I'm not going to look. There are, I think, 20. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are 20 prompts in here. Either 20 or 25. Something like that. Actually, there's 25 prompts in here. All right, here we go. Let's go with this one here. We have a green package, which doesn't really mean anything, but that's okay. All right, we're going to pull it apart. All right, and then let's get our package on the inside. Our little prompt is right here. All right, I don't know if this will pick up on the camera or not. These are handwritten. All right, let's try this one more time. All right, so it is read a standalone book. So that is exciting. That gives us a pretty wide range of books. So let me go ahead and start looking through my books and see what standalone book we're going to read for our first book for this game. Unfortunately, all my mythology-inspired books on my TBR are part of series, so I couldn't choose one of those, so I had to find a different book outside of my TBR. But as this is only roll one and we only rolled a one, there will be plenty more time, I feel, to get my TBR books into this reading game. The book I decided to go with, though, is called The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. And this book is based on Norse mythology. It follows a banished witch named Angrboda, where she has just undergone punishment from Odin for refusing to provide him with knowledge of the future. And the fire leaves her injured and powerless, so she flees to the farthest reaches of a remote forest. And there she is found by a man who reveals himself to be Loki, and her initial distrust of him transforms into a deep and abiding love. Their union produces 3 unusual children, each who has a secret destiny. But as her prophecy powers slowly begin to regenerate, she learns that her blissful life and possibly all of existence is in danger. So with help from the fierce huntress Skadi, with whom she shares a growing bond, she must choose whether she'll accept the fate that she's foreseen for her beloved family or rise to remake their future. So that is the book we are going with. It sounds like a pretty interesting premise. We'll see how it is. I haven't read any books by this author before. It's an average size book. It's only 363 pages, so not too long, but not too short either. So hopefully I will enjoy it. I'll touch base with you once I finish the book, let you know how I feel about it, and then we'll go ahead and do our second roll, which will hopefully be bigger than a 1, because otherwise this is going to take me a very long time to complete. Today is a Friday. It is, I almost said May. It's actually June 6th. So I'm hoping to complete this game by the end of the weekend, but you know, you never know. And starting off with a 1 does not seem like that may not go according to plan. I will say though, just looking outside, it has gotten darker outside. It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it looks like rain is coming. And I think it's supposed to rain for most of this weekend. So I do feel this is the perfect weekend to do this reading game. I love reading when it's like raining and storming outside. So, you know, for once, having had this plan for this weekend, I am very excited about the rain. So I will, like I said, check in with you once I finish this book, and I'll let you know how it is. So I'll see you guys in a little bit. All right, I am back after having finished the first book of this reading game, which was The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. And overall, I really enjoyed this story. I was actually surprised it was a debut novel by this author because it was such a well-written, very atmospheric story. And I honestly thought that she had several books that she wrote before this one. So this book is a Norse mythology retelling of the story of Angrboda and Loki, and is told from Angrboda's viewpoint. It was actually pretty interesting because almost the entire story is told from this cave in the Ironwoods where Angrboda is living after she was killed 3 times and came back to life 3 times after being burned at a pier. And she doesn't really remember much of her past except being burned 3 times and settled in this cave. And almost the entire story is told from this cave. And it's kind of impressive that the story was as interesting as it was, having had just this one setting. It kind of reminded me of, I think it's called The Snow Child, which was told mostly from a cabin in the woods. I will say I learned a lot through this retelling about Loki and Angrboda and their kids, and just about Ragnarok as well. The only time I've come across Loki before is in the TV series Supernatural, and that Loki, other than being a trickster, didn't really have much to do with the Norse mythology retelling I just read. And I also came across him in the Magnus Chase Gods of Asgard series, which is by Rick Riordan. I've only read that first book, but a lot of the characters in this book were also present in that book, even though mostly just by name, Thor, Odin, the giant wolf, the giant serpent. Those mythology based characters I came across in the Magnus Chase series as well as in this book. But that was really my only introduction until this story into Norse mythology, and I felt this was a really good introduction into that whole story. And it was especially interesting because it was told almost from an outsider's view, because Angrboda doesn't really get a lot of recognition in Loki's story other than being the mother of his 3 children that aren't all quite human or not human at all. So it definitely made for a interesting story from that standpoint. This story is definitely a very atmospheric, I guess, character-driven story. It's a very slow burning story. There's not a lot of action that goes on. And like I said, most of it takes place in this cave with people coming and going, visiting Angrboda. We get to see her 3 children kind of grow up. And then we get to just kind of see the whole Norse mythology, the big stories told, seen from her viewpoint. So this story is a little bit on the slower side. It's not one that you're just going to rush through, which is why it took me a little bit longer to read it. Not that I wasn't enjoying it, but it is a more slow-driven book. The descriptions, the characters were all done really well. I really enjoyed the author's version of Loki, and I enjoyed kind of seeing their children as kids versus what you see in Norse mythology where they're already grown. The author of the book also majored in history, and one of her interests is Norse mythology and their sagas, so she knew a lot about it going into this book. So if you are interested in learning more about Norse mythology and just reading a story that is really well written, this is definitely a good introduction into the Norse mythology, especially into Loki and his kids and everything that happens to him throughout his life. And it's a book that does keep your interest and you remember a lot of things from reading it versus if, you're just reading a history book on the topic. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 because of that. And I'm very happy that I got to read it for this first round. It's one of those books that I probably would not have picked up if it weren't for this game, which is why I love playing this game, because I get introduced to all these books I otherwise wouldn't have. But that is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek, and now we gotta move on to our second book. Hopefully we roll a bigger number than 1. I don't know what it is with these games wanting me to roll these low numbers and read like 5 to 7 books in a game. But let's all hope for a nice large number. Anything, 4 bigger would be amazing. But let's bring up that game board and go ahead and do that second roll. All right, here is our game board. We are on the first space, obviously. Let's go ahead and do our next roll and see what we're going to land on. Here we go. A 2. Well, that is better than a 1. But that's really all we got going for us. We did land on Dragon Wheel, which means we will need to pull a dragon out of our dragon bag. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So we have 10 dragons in this bag. Each are number 1 through 10, and each corresponds to a specific mythology, which I will put up on the screen here so you can see. So let's go ahead and see what mythology we will be reading next. So we can't peek. Here we go. Well, let's grab this one here. All right, so we have a yellow dragon, which has nothing to do with anything really. But our number is going to be the number. All right, so there we go. This is dragon number 6. So as you can see on the list, the number 6 dragon corresponds to mythology that is from South Asia. So countries such as India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Well, we rolled a bigger number than 1. Yes, it was a 2, but that's still bigger than 1 looking on the bright side of things here. So we moved forward 2 whole spots and we landed on the Dragon Wheel token, which is the token I am most nervous about because I have absolutely no say over what book we are going to read. We pulled our dragon out of our bag and we got this cute little yellow dragon and it had the number 6 on it. And what that means is we'll be spinning the wheel that has our South Asian mythology-based inspired books on it. So this wheel has 10 books on it, and looking through the list, there's a lot of good options on here. The one I am hoping for is the Aru Shah book, which is the second book in the series. It's a middle grade series, and the first book was a lot of fun to read, and I think I'll really enjoy the second book. Plus, it's a middle grade book, so nice, easy read. But knowing how this game is going so far, that's probably not going to be the book we land on. So let's go ahead, let's bring up the wheel, and let's see what book we are going to be reading for round 2. So here is our wheel of South Asian based / inspired mythology books. Let's go ahead and spin it and let's go ahead and hope for the best. All right, here we go, spinning the wheel. All right. All right, we got the Jasmine throne. That sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is based off of the top of my head. So let me go look it up really quickly and we'll learn about the book together if you also are unsure what it is about. All right, so I found the book. The book was written by Tasha Suri, and like The Witch's Heart, it was also published in 2021. So apparently that's the year that we will be reading books published in this game. So this book is based on the mythology and history of India and is book 1 in a trilogy called The Burning Kingdoms. It follows a Princess Malini who has been imprisoned by her dictator brother and spends her days in isolation in an ancient temple that was once the source of the powerful, magical, deathless waters, but is now little more than a decaying ruin. One of her maidservants, Priya, makes the treacherous journey to the top of the ancient temple every night to clean Malini's chambers. And she is very happy with this job, so long as anyone keeps from guessing the dangerous secret that she hides. But one day, Malini accidentally sees Priya's true nature, and their destinies become irrevocably tangled. One is a vengeful princess seeking to depose her brother from his throne, and the other is a priestess seeking to find her family. Together, they will change the fate of an empire. So that is the story we'll be reading next. The only downside that I can see right now is that it is 533 pages long, so it's definitely going to take us some time to get through it. It's a good thing we have 6 days until this video goes up. We have plenty of time to finish this reading game. I always leave some extra time for my longer reading games because I never know how the game is going to treat me. And this is why. We are only on space 3 and already have 2 books to read. So we need plenty of days to get through this game, apparently. All right, I will be back when I have completed this book because if I check in with you in the middle of every book I read, this video is probably going to be 2 or 3 hours long at this rate. So I will let you know my thoughts on this book once I get to the end of it. So that will probably be tomorrow, but in the off chance it's tonight, I will see you then. All right, I'll see you guys soon. All right, I am back. It's been quite a few hours since we last talked, like over 24 hours, but I have finally done it. I have completed The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. Before we get to talking about the book, I just wanted to let you know that out of curiosity, I went ahead and looked up the pages for all the other 9 books that were on that wheel that we spun that got us The Jasmine Throne. None of the other books were more than 500 pages long. They were all less than 500 pages. And there were 2 middle grade books that we could have gotten on that spin as well. So out of all the books, the game decided to give us the longest book on that spin wheel, which, the way this game is going, not that surprising. So the Jasmine Throne is the first book in a trilogy called The Burning Kingdom, and it's a epic fantasy book with just a touch of romance in it as well. The book is more inspired by mythology than it is a retelling of any particular Indian mythology, and it's also inspired by Indian history as well. The book was definitely long. It was 530 pages, and it felt like an epic fantasy. It's been a while since I've read a long epic fantasy book, and I do enjoy my epic fantasy books, but reading them during a reading challenge is definitely difficult because it's hard to stay engaged nonstop through these types of books because there's a lot of world building. There's a lot of background on the political system and not so much action. So I ended up giving this book 3.75 out of 5. I almost gave it a 4. The one main reason I ended up not giving it a 4 was because of how many different viewpoints the story was told from. Before I talk about that, just recapping what this book is about, without spoilers, of course. My cat is just pacing around, going under the camera. Okay. So this book is set in a fantasy world that is broken up into kind of like 5 areas. Most of them fall under one kingdom, one emperor. So the 2 main viewpoints this book is told from is from Malini and Priya's viewpoint. Malini is a princess, the sister of the current emperor of this kingdom, and the emperor is just a bad guy. Right at the beginning of the book, he wants to basically burn his sister on a pier that he wants to light on fire. So he's a bad guy, not a great emperor. Priya is a maidservant to some high-born person in the area that she lives in. But Priya also has a secret that she's more than she appears to be, but she doesn't want anyone to find this out. The other issue going on is that where Priya lives, there is a disease called the rot where people are infected, mostly those who work out in the fields, farmers, people who cut down trees, things like that. And once the rot takes over you, it's basically a death sentence. And what the rot causes is you basically start turning into nature. You start your skin starts turning into bark. You start getting leaves in your hair. You may sprout flowers, stems, leaves, things like that. So not a good thing to have. So how Melina and Priya end up meeting, which happens way early in the book, is Melina, instead of dying on the pier, her brother ends up sending her to the city that Priya lives in and making her a prisoner in the temple of that city. And Priya volunteers to be one of the maidservants that cleans the temple that she is in, and they end up meeting that way. And the 2 of them kind of embark on their epic quest, which is basically to throw the emperor off of his throne. So that's kind of the gist of the story. Your typical bad emperor, good guys want to throw the emperor off of the throne. The reason I ended up giving it a 3.75 instead of a 4 is that while I love reading the chapters that had Priya and Malini's viewpoints, there are a lot of other chapters from a lot of other characters that are in the story that I found kind of took me away from the story a little bit. And some of them even had Malia or Priya as a character in that chapter, and I felt like it would just be better and more succinct to write the story more from Melina and Priya's viewpoints rather than throwing all these other characters. I think, here and there, having one of these other characters' viewpoint would be fine, but just how many of these chapters were told from these other people's viewpoints, I felt just kind of took away from the story a little bit. The world building in this book I enjoyed. I felt like I knew how the magic system worked in this world. I felt like I knew most of the politics in this world. It was definitely kind of a convoluted political system. You had the emperor, but then you had these people who used to live in the temple, known as the Temple Children, which was in the city that Priya lives in. And then you have this whole other area of priests. So there was a lot of different political/religious stuff going on that got a little bit confusing. But I felt like by the end, I had a pretty good handle on what was occurring. in the story from that standpoint. I also enjoyed the two main characters. I liked how they grew throughout the story. I felt like they had good characterizations. They had both bad and good tendencies, and I felt like I knew them, could imagine what they would be like, if I had met them in real life. The side characters, some of them were more fleshed out than others. But I feel like in an epic fantasy, you're going to have some side characters that you know better and some side characters that you just don't know as well, just because of how big the world the author is trying to build is. So overall, I definitely enjoyed the story. I was happy to read a epic fantasy book because, like I said, it's been a while. So if you enjoy epic fantasy, enjoy good world building, enjoy kind of the slow burning plot with some action, kind of spread out here and there. This is definitely a book to check out. It did win the World Fantasy Award. It's definitely a well-written book, and I definitely enjoyed reading it. It was just a little bit on the longer side for a reading game, but we did it. We made it through, and I'm very happy about that. I'll definitely at some point go on to read the rest of the trilogy. I'm looking forward to that, to kind of see how everything that got set in play in this story, how it all kind of turns out at the end. So that's The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. Now we need to go ahead and do our third roll of the game. We're already on day 3 of this reading challenge. I have a couple more days set to record, so hopefully we'll finish it by then. All I want in this roll is the ability to either read a nice middle grade story to kind of just relax after a epic fantasy, or to get a book that is on my TBR, because my TBR has sort of been, set to the side during this reading game. So one of those two things would make me super happy. I feel like the game owes me at this point, after rolling a 1 and a 2 and then giving me the longest book on the spinning wheel. I feel like it's time for the game to be a little bit nicer. So let's go ahead and bring up the game board and see what book we are going to read next. All right, so here is our game board. We are right here, so we have a ways to go before we reach the end. So let's go ahead and let's get a good roll. Let's do this. We can do this. I have faith in this dice. All right, here we go. Oh my gosh, a 2. What is going on? 1, 2. All right, so we have a oracle card. So let's choose that prompt now, and then we have to choose the 2 dragons as well, and then we'll figure out the book. So the oracle card is going to be, there we go. Read a book set in a richly built magical world. So that's good. That's kind of like a broad prompt. So there we go. And then we're going to choose 2 dragons, whichever mythology they correspond to is what the book has to be based on. All right, so here we go. Let's grab this dragon. All right, so we have the green dragon and that dragon. It's a 1. There we go. So we got dragon 1. So the 1 corresponds to Chinese mythology. All right. And then our second dragon is going to be this orange one. And that's a 2. I couldn't have planned this out. And number 2 stands for Slavic-based mythology. I'm starting to wonder if this die has any other numbers than 1 or 2 in it. I can't believe we got another 2 in this game. But we did move forward 2 spots, and this time we landed on the oracle card prompt. And the oracle card prompt was to read a book set in a richly built magical world. And then we chose our 2 dragons, which were dragon number 1, which corresponds to Chinese mythology, and dragon number 2, which corresponds to Slavic mythology. So we have to find a book that fits either of these 2 mythologies and has a richly built magical world. I feel like that shouldn't be too hard because most of these fantasy books based on or inspired by mythology are pretty richly built. All right, first I'm going to check my TBR to see if there's any matching books on there. So I checked my TBR list. At least in this aspect, the game is being nice because there are 3 books on my TBR that are also inspired by Chinese mythology. So we're going to choose one of those 3 because at least I can also check off a book from my June TBR. All right, so first up we got Of Jade and Dragons, which is by Amber Chen, and it's a fantasy book that follows a 18-year-old girl who wants to become an engineer like her father, but after her father dies, it kind of throws her in a loop. She ends up having to enter the male-only apprenticeship disguised as her brother, and she also has a target on her back because her father was so well known for engineering. She also becomes infatuated by the 8th prince, who kind of has mysterious plans of his own. So this book is a little bit on the longer side, not quite as long as the Jasmine Throne, but it is over 450 pages. I will say the words in this book are huge and pretty well spaced out, the line spacing. So even though it looks to be 450 pages, it's probably not truly that long of a book. So that's our first option. And then we have 2 books by Emily Wen Zhao. We have Dark Star Burning, Ash Falls White, which is a sequel to The Song of Silver, Flame Like Night that I read about a year ago. It definitely has a pretty richly built magical world in it. And it's kind of the sequel to the story of the 2 main characters, Lan and Zen, who are basically trying to get rid of the conquering force that has taken over their kingdom known as the Elation. So that is another option. And then lastly, we have The Scorpion and the Night Blossom, which is the first book in this, I think it's a duology. So this book follows An Ying, who wants to enter the immortality trials to heal her dying mother. And to complete them, she knows that she's going to need kind of all the help she gets. So when a rival contestant who is both powerful, also happens to be handsome, promises her protection and a chance of survival for both An Ying and her mother, she has to find out quickly whether she can trust him or not. Let the immortality trials begin. So I forgot to tell you how long this book is. This book is about 340 pages long, but the words are a lot smaller than in Of Jade and Dragon, so it may end up reading the same. And then this book is like 408 pages, but it has really big words, and the line spacing is very widely spaced. So out of these 3 books, the book I think I'm going to choose is The Scorpion and the Night Blossom, because when I was making my June TBR, this is the book that I really wanted to read and was really excited to read. I love books that have trials in them, and I'm excited to find out what happens in this one. I assume based on the author's other books I've read, which have been very well-built magical worlds, I assume it'll be the same for this one. And we're just going to bank on that because sometimes it's hard to tell before you actually get into the book. But I think it is going to have a, what did I say? A richly built magical world just based on, these trials themselves. So this will be our 3rd book of the game on space number 5. So hopefully this will be a much quicker read than our last book. And I will check in with you probably tomorrow because it's already almost 10 o'clock at night. And I'm hoping this book is a quick read. I think it will be just based on what it is about and based on how big the words are. So I'm going to get to reading. I'm going to see if I can get at least 100 pages done tonight and then finish it up tomorrow morning. And then we'll be back for our 4th roll of the game, which I still cannot believe we're only on space 5. At some point, the odds are that we have to roll a number larger than 2. It just has to happen. All right, so I'll check in with you once, oops, that's backwards, once this book is complete. So I'll see you guys soon. So I just finished The Scorpion and the Night Blossom, which is by Emily Wen Zhao. And it's the first book in the 3 Realms trilogy, or not trilogy, duology. And it is a book that is inspired by Chinese mythology and stories. So overall, I did enjoy this book. It definitely had a little bit of a better pace than the Jasmine Throne did, so I found it a little bit easier to read from that standpoint. The book is set in a fantasy world where there are 3 realms. There is the Kingdom of Rivers, which is where the mortals live, the Kingdom of Night, where the demons live, and the Kingdom of Sky, where the immortals live. So we did have some good world building here, which, met our prompt of a richly built magical world. And there is magic in this book as well. So it met the criteria. This book is told entirely from the viewpoint of An Ying, who is a mortal young adult who is living with her mom and sister in the mortal world, in the central province of the mortal world, where many, many years ago, a demon attacked her family, killed her dad, and took half the soul from her mom. So her mom's kind of been living in this comatose state for years and years, only kept alive because An Ying knows how to make this special tea out of lotus flowers to keep her alive. An Ying's dad was also this practitioner of magic, and he left his daughter with all these books on how to do magic in the hopes that she will one day go to the Temple of, I want to say Doom, but that's not right. Temple of Dawn, and take part in the immortality trials. There are many reasons that he wants her to do that, some of which she knows, some of which she doesn't. But An Ying has her own reason to want to go take part in these immortality trials that take place in the Kingdom of Sky, which is where the immortals live. And that is the winner of the immortality trials are given a immortality pill, which if they take it themselves, allows them to be immortal, basically. But she hasn't won it for herself. She has read in a book that if her mom, who only has, half her soul, was to take one of these pills, that it will kind of regenerate her soul and she'll be back to how she used to be. So that is why she wants to compete in the immortality trials, is to get her mom back. Along the way to participate in these immortality trials, she comes across another participant named Yu Chen, who seems to be a very powerful practitioner of magic who already knows a lot more than she does, and she kind of has to make a decision whether she can trust him or not, to help her get through the immortality trials, because on her own she doesn't have the strength to do it. And that is kind of the plot of the book. So like I said, I definitely enjoy this book. I give it a 4 out of 5. It definitely leans on the YA side. There's not a lot of spice to it. There's just one scene in the book that has some spice to it. And that's easily skipped over if that's not for you. It doesn't really take away from the story that much. I did enjoy the character of An Ying. I like how the author kind of developed her throughout the book. I like that she wasn't like this powerful person who, was going to be able to do everything on her own. I like that she needed help and she had some of her own vulnerabilities as she tries to get through these immortality trials. There is definitely some romance in here as well. It's not a full-blown romantasy. I feel like the romance was kind of secondary to the main plot, but it definitely, I guess, was important. It definitely had some importance to the story, I would say. I also enjoyed the world building. I felt like I knew the magic system well. I felt like I knew the world well. And I felt like the author set this up very well for the second book. When I first started reading it, I wasn't sure what the second book was going to be about. But the author has definitely set herself up well for the second book in this duology. And she did it without really giving us a huge cliffhanger at the end. I hate the books that leave this like cliffhanger that once that is like a 1 or 2 lines at the end, and because of that you want to read the next book, not because of anything that's going on before that, but just based off of those last 2 lines. It's just those types of cliffhangers just feel really cheesy to me. This author set up what was going to happen in the second book way before the end, and there wasn't any type of cliffhangers like that, but you definitely want to know what's going to happen in the second book. I feel it's not a standalone novel in that sense. I also like all the different twists that got thrown in here throughout the books, none of which I guessed, and I felt that they were really well done. There's definitely hints there of what was going on, but not enough for me to kind of clue in and know exactly the reveals that she was going to give throughout the kind of second half of the book. So this is a series. I'm definitely excited to read the second book in it. Also, it's a duology, which I enjoy because, 2 books, you're done with the series. And yeah, I'm definitely enjoying this author's book. So can't wait to see what the second book holds in this series. All right, so that's enough for the Scorpion and the Night Blossom. We now have to go on to our 4th roll. I cannot believe I'm saying our 4th roll and we have only moved 5 spots. So let's bring up the game board and see what happens next. All right, here we are back on our game board. We are in that spot right here. If this game continues to go as it has, we'll either be landing on Mystic Mail or the Oracle card. Either of which, at the rate this is going, is fine. So let's go ahead and do our fourth roll of the game so we can get our fourth book of the game. Here we go. Are you kidding me? I don't understand what is happening. Okay. 1, 2. Oracle card. All right, so our prompt for the Oracle card is going to be read a book about royalty, lost heirs, or political intrigue. And then our 2 dragons. All right, so dragon number 1 is going to be, we'll go with this dragon right here, a dark green dragon. And that is dragon number 4. That corresponds to Norse mythology. And then our second mythology option is going to be yellow dragon. Again, we've had this one. Dragon number 6. And that is our South Asian mythology. I don't know what is happening. I don't know why we can't roll anything above a 2. I don't understand what is going on here. This is going to be a very, very long game and a very, very long video at this rate. All right, well, we rolled a 2. We got the Oracle card, which is to read a book about royalty, lost heirs, or political intrigue. Our 2 mythologies that they have to fall under are either going to be Norse, can't say that, mythology, or South Asian mythology. So let me start looking through. I'm pretty sure I don't have a option on my TBR for this prompt. I think I have the Hammer of Thor on my TBR, but I don't know if I want to go with that one because I think that one's pretty long. I'm going to try to find a shorter one for this 4th book in this game, but we'll see what I can find. I will be back shortly. All right, I found 2 options, both middle grade books, and 1 each from each of the mythologies that this prompt has to fall under. So we're just looking for books about royalty, lost heirs, or anything with political intrigue. So kind of a broad-ish prompt. So I think these 2 books fit into it. So the first one is the book that I have on my TBR, and that is Hammer of Thor, which is the 2nd book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. This series follows Magnus Chase, who is living in the Hotel Valhalla after he is saved by a Valkyrie and taken to the Hotel Valhalla because he died in a battle, basically. So this is the 2nd book in the series where basically he and his friends have to go figure out what happened to the Hammer of Thor. So this book does have to do with lost heirs, kind of like the Percy Jackson series, which is also by Rick Riordan, where these kids are children, half mortal, half god, and they don't always know who their father is. So technically that's kind of like a lost heir. So that's why I think this book fits the prompt good enough to be used if I decide to read it. So the upside, like I said, is that it is on my TBR. The downside is that it is 459 pages long. So a little bit on the longer side, but it is a middle grade. The 2nd book we are choosing from is A Serpent Secret, which is by Sayantani Dasgupta, and is the 1st book in the Kiranmala in the Kingdom Beyond series. So this book follows Kiranmala, who is celebrating her 12th birthday as a 6th grader living in New Jersey, when her parents mysteriously vanish and a demon slams through her kitchen, determined to eat her alive. It's not your typical 12th birthday. While she was growing up, her parents always told her these stories that she was a real Indian princess and how she comes from a secret place not of this world. Of course, she didn't really believe them until the morning of her 12th birthday when all of this happened. Then two princes ring her doorbell, telling her that they have come to save her. They whisk her away into another dimension full of magic, and there she has to kind of solve riddles and battle demons, all while avoiding the Serpent King of the underworld in order to find her parents and basically save New Jersey and her entire world. So those are our two options. This one's only 351 pages long. I know the Hammer of Thor is on my TBR and it would be very useful to get that read, but it's 100 pages longer. And at this point, I need to get through this game because it is Monday now and my plan is to have this up on Friday. And we are on space 7. So I need some shorter books to get through. Plus, it does sound kind of like a interesting plot to this story. So we are going to go ahead and read The Serpent's Secret. And hopefully it doesn't take me too long because it's a middle grade book. It's only 351 pages. And it sounds like it's going to be entertaining. So I will check back in with you guys once this book is finished. Oh, and it does match the prompt because technically Kiran Mala as a princess is a lost heir. So we checked the lost heirs prompt off. We checked the South Asian mythology prompt off. So all that's left is to get to reading. So I'll be back with you guys soon. Hopefully soon. All right. Book number 4, read and completed. Another check on this never-ending game. I looked it up. I have now read 1,655 pages in this game, and I don't think we're halfway around the board yet, so things are going great. So the book I just read is The Serpent's Secret, and it's the first book in the Kiran Mala and the Kingdom Beyond series, and it was written by Sayantani Dasgupta. So this was exactly the book that I need to read on this roll. This was a very lighthearted, fun middle grade book. And it was a adventure story, so there was always something going on. So it was a very quick, very easy read. It was easy to get into, and I definitely enjoyed it a lot. I don't rate middle grade books too much just because they're kind of in their own little area. They're not, written towards me. They're written towards your middle grade age group. But this is definitely one of my most favorite middle grade books that I have read. I just love the humor. I love the adventure. I love the characters. I really definitely enjoyed it. So this was not a retelling of any particular mythology. It was more a book that was inspired by both folklore and mythology. The folklore that it was inspired by comes from West Bengali, India. And there's actually a folk tale that is about the main character, Kiran Mala, though this story doesn't really follow that folktale that much by what the author says in her author's note. This book also has a lot of other West Bengali inspirations in it, including the demons that are in it, known as I am not going to pronounce this correctly, but the Rakahash, and they are also seen in Hindu mythology as well. This book starts off in New Jersey and follows 12-year-old Kiran Mala, who was raised by her two parents, not knowing where she came from. She thought, they were her actual parents, but they always would tell her that she is a real Indian princess. But she just thought that's, something they said. She didn't really think that was true until her 12th birthday, when she comes home, finds her parents are gone. They left her this little note telling her that she is this true Indian princess, and they left her this map and told her that when the two princes show up at her door, she should do whatever they say. And lo and behold, two princes show up at her door, and she gets whisked away to the, She gets whisked away to the kingdom beyond 7 oceans and 13 rivers. And there she now has to embark on a journey to find her parents because they are in trouble because a magical spell that was supposed to protect them disappeared on her 12th birthday, and they are now needing to be saved in this fantasy kingdom. The whole story is told from the viewpoint of Kiran Mala, and there are the two princes that we kind of follow along on this journey as well, and there's a talking bird as well not quite as entertaining as the talking bird in the Arusha series, which is also based on Indian mythology. I believe it's Hindu, but I'm not 100% correct. Or I'm not 100% sure. But still, talking bird. And then also to make it a fun read, all the demons talk in rhyme. So, and there's riddles thrown in as well. So it's just a fun, lighthearted book. Plus, you get to learn a little bit about West Bengali folklore as you are reading it. And I always find that's a fun way to learn more about different cultures, different histories, is through, through stories that are inspired by different folklore. So I really enjoy this book. Like I said, it is book 1 in a series. I will definitely be reading book 2 and book 3 at some point. And I'm very happy that this was the book that we went with for this prompt. It definitely fit the prompt because the main character was a lost princess. She was taken away to New Jersey in exile to basically protect her from her father. So that is The Serpent's Secret. If you're looking just for a fun middle grade book based on folklore and mythology that, you just want a quick read, this is definitely one that I would recommend. So that's it for book number 4. We're going to bring up our game board for this never-ending game that's never going to stop. After I rolled a 2 my last turn, I practiced roll the dice a couple of times and I was getting 4s, 7s, and it's like, why can't that happen in the game? But that's okay. Maybe it will this time around. I have no idea. We just have to go ahead and do our 5th roll. We will hope for the best. We'll see what book we end up with, and yeah, that's about it. So let me bring up the game board and we'll go ahead and do our next roll of the game. All right, here is our game board. We are on space number 7, which is right here. And we have to get all the way to there. So let's go ahead, do another roll. And yeah, let's see what happens. A 4! Not the highest number, but at least it's not a 1 or a 2. Yay. Though I'm looking ahead to see what we will be landing on. And 2, 3, 4. Dragon Wheel, not my favorite one to land on. There's only 4 on the entire board, and so far we've hit the 2 that we've had a chance to hit. But yeah, let's hope that we actually get a book that's shorter than the 500-page book we got last time. But first, let's pull our dragon. All right, here we go. Not looking. Let's go. I don't know which one. Here, I got one here. Ooh, the light blue dragon. Love this color. Now, let me see if I can get it to focus. So this is dragon number 7. Dragon number 7 corresponds to our Greek and Roman mythology books, so that is where our book will be inspired by. So let's see what book we are going to read. All right, so here is our Greek and Roman mythology wheel. There are 10 books on here that are either retellings or inspired by Greek or Roman mythology. Some of these books are longer than the others, so that makes me a little bit nervous. None of these books are on my TBR. So this will just be another extra book we'll be reading in June. We haven't read any Greek or Roman mythology-based books yet. So that's kind of nice that we get to go ahead and read a new mythology-based story. So I'm going to go ahead and hit spin and we'll see what book we'll be reading next. Here we go. Alright, we'll be reading The Games Gods Play. I have heard of this book. I remember seeing it on some YouTube videos, but I don't remember exactly what it is about. So let me look it up real quick and I will let you know a quick synopsis. First off, it's 509 pages long. Yay, another long one. So The Games Gods Play is by Abigail Owen. It was published last year, 2024, and it's book 1 in the series known as The Crucible. And it looks like another kind of trials-based fantasy book. So the book follows... Actually, it doesn't say what the main character's name is, but the main character is a office clerk who one night runs into the worst god of all, Hades, and for the first time ever, Hades has entered the Crucible, which is the deadly contest the gods hold to determine a new ruler to sit on the throne of Olympus. But instead of fighting their own battles, they name mortals to compete in their stead. and Hades has chosen our main character, who calls herself a sarcastic nobody with a curse on her shoulder. So that is kind of what the book is about. It does have a rating of 4.14. So I think most people who read it enjoy it. It does sound like a fun book. Like I said, the only downside in this choice is that it is 500 pages long. But other than that, it looks like it should be a good read. So I'm gonna get to reading it. It's what time is it? It's 2 o'clock now. Hopefully I can finish it by late this evening because I really want to do another roll and get this game done. I'm supposed to edit this video tomorrow, which is Wednesday. And we are still 8 spaces away from the end of the board. So let's see how I can do. I'm gonna go focus, read, complete this book, which I'm looking forward to because this definitely sounds like the type of book I enjoy with trials and games and things like that. And I will get back to you once this book is completed. It is midnight, and I have finally finished The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen, and this is probably my favorite book that I've read so far in this challenge, even though it was super long. So this book most reminds me of The Hunger Games, because all the different people who have been chosen to represent the gods and goddesses in this crucible, they have to make it through 12 different trials and survive, basically. The story is told entirely from the viewpoint of Lyra, who is the chosen competitor for Hades. She happens to meet him outside of Zeus's temple, and I think it was San Francisco. That was a way long time ago. And apparently, he ends up, after that meeting, choosing her to be his representative in the crucible, where whoever wins this crucible, whatever god or goddess they are representative for, they become the king or queen of all gods, basically. So he chooses Lyra to be his representative, and this is the first time that he has ever chosen a representative in this crucible. There's a lot at stake in this book, and you kind of get bits and pieces of it throughout the whole story, so it definitely keeps you engaged. It's a very fast-paced book. There's a lot of action going on. It kind of alternates between the trials and then the relationship between Hades and Lyra. I really enjoyed Lyra as the main character. The entire book is pretty much told from her viewpoint, and she's just a fun character to follow. She's very sarcastic in her sense of humor. She is also kind of a selfless character as well, who cares about her fellow competitors, which is not typically what happens in these kinds of crucibles. So she's kind of shaking everything up from what the gods and goddesses are used to. I also enjoy how the relationship builds between Hades and Lyra. It seems very natural, and I love the banter that they have going on back and forth throughout the entire book. Like I said, this was a fast read. I felt like each chapter had something going on. The chapters were also short, and I feel like books who have shorter chapters, especially these types of books, for some reason I tend to read them a lot faster than those books that have really long chapters. I really enjoyed it. I really had a lot of fun reading it. There wasn't a lot of world building, I would say. This was more of a character-driven romantasy, specifically the two main characters, Lyra and Hades. You get introduced to the other gods and goddesses. You get to know a little bit about them. Same with the other competitors. But this was definitely a book just focused on the two main characters. To that extent, the one thing I will say is it was hard to remember which competitor was playing for which god or goddess, and I think having a legend or something, I didn't see in the book copy that I used, I think having a legend that matched the competitor to the god or goddess would have been kind of nice to have, because I could not keep any of that straight in my head. Even those characters that we got to know a little bit better. The ones that Lyra kind of became allies with, I still couldn't remember which god or goddess they belonged to. Though it wasn't like the most important part of the story. I think it would have just been a nice little additional touch. This is book 1 of the series. I don't know how long the series is planning on being, if it's going to be a duology or trilogy. Oh my gosh. I can tell it's midnight here. But the way that the book ends, it definitely ends on a cliffhanger. that is going to make you want to read that second book and kind of see what happens afterwards. So I'm looking forward to the second book. I don't think it's out yet. I think it comes out later this year. Pretty sure I saw in September, but don't hold me to that because that was, I don't know, 10 hours ago when I was downloading the book. But I'm definitely looking forward to that book coming out and seeing the next part that takes place in this story that the author has built. I also realized that she's also the author of one of my books on my TBR, The Liar's Crown, that I was really looking forward to reading. And I'm hoping that I enjoy that series as much as I enjoyed this book. But that's it for, what are we, book number 5? I think, yeah, book number 5. So even though it's midnight, we're probably not going to get much more reading done. I do want to go ahead and do our next roll of this game because I just need to know how many more books I might get. So let's go ahead, bring up that game board, and do our 6th roll of the game. All right, so here is our game board. We are right over here, so definitely over halfway through the board. So let's go ahead and do our 6th roll, see what we get, and yeah, we're just gonna hope for the best. And we got a 6. 3, 4, 5, 6, which means we are 2 spots away from finishing this game. I figured we would have one more book to read, so this is not too bad. And we landed on Mystic Mail, which is my favorite because all we have is a prompt and we can fit any type of mythology with this prompt. Let's go ahead and get our mail package. You can see in there is all our different mail packages. I'm going to go ahead and choose one of them that has a prompt inside. All right, we have an orange one. Again, colors don't mean anything, but I do love this paper. All right, let's go ahead and open our Mystic Mail. See what we get. All right. Here's our prompt. Are you kidding me? So our prompt is to read a book over 400 pages, of course. I'm going to first look at the books I have on my TBR, see if we can't get started on one of those, and go from there. So we got a 6, so that was great. That was amazing news. We are so close to the end of the game now, and we landed on Mystic Mail. And I, chose my random Mystic Mail package. We opened the prompt, and of course we got the prompt that is a book over 400 pages because, why not? Why not read another long book? So I ended up going through my TBR books because it's almost mid-June and I need to start getting through those. So if we can throw one into this game, might as well do that. And there are 2 books that fit this prompt. Both of them we've talked about before, so I'm just going to quickly go over them. The first is Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. This is the Chinese mythology-inspired book that is 466 pages, so over 400 pages long. It follows an 18-year-old who dreams of becoming a world-class engineer, just like her father, but then her father ends up dying and she has to disguise herself as her brother to infiltrate the male-only apprenticeship trial with the help of another unlikely ally who happens to be the nation's taciturn 8th prince. Now, her father, being famous as an engineer, places a target on her back, and she has to stay ahead of her fellow competitors. And the killer that killed her dad is still searching for her father's journal, so she's also in the target range for that as well. So that is our first option. It's a YA novel. And then our other option is The Hammer of Thor, which is the second book in Magnus Chase in the Gods of Asgard series by Rick Riordan that follows Magnus Chase. And it's a Norse-inspired mythology book. And Magnus has been living in the Hotel Valhalla. And in this book, in the second book of the series, he has to go on a quest to find the missing hammer of Thor's. So those are 2 options. The Hammer of Thor book is like 450 some pages, so just a little bit less. But is middle grade. So, having read a lot in this challenge so far, I'm going to go ahead and choose the middle grade book. I'm going to go ahead and choose The Hammer of Thor, knock that book off of my TBR. And also, it's one of my series books that's in my series jar, so I can check another book off of that series as well. So that is what we are going to read for this next book, The Hammer of Thor. I enjoyed the first book in the Magnus Chase series, so I'm looking forward to the second one. And yeah, I don't know if I'll be starting it tonight, but I'll definitely start it tomorrow morning and then hopefully have it finished sometime tomorrow. And then we'll do our next roll, and hopefully we will be on track to get this video out on Friday. All right, I will be back tomorrow, let you know how the book is, so I'll see you guys soon. Once again, I am back, having completed yet another book on this mythology reading game. I have finished Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, The Hammer of Thor, which is the second book in the series Magnus Chase, and it follows Norse gods. So this was another fun middle grade book, very lighthearted, very kind of like one of those adventure quest books that are always fun to read, by Rick Riordan. I always enjoy all his books I've read so far. I love the Percy Jackson series, and this is just another fun series. I actually think I may like this series a little bit better. I like the character Magnus Chase and his kind of sarcastic humor that he does, and I like the side characters in this book as well. Not to give away any spoilers, because this is the second book in the series, but basically this book follows Magnus Chase. In the first book, this is not really a spoiler, but he ends up dying really early on in the book, and a Valkyrie, Sam, brings him to the Hotel Valhalla, where he now becomes one of the warriors that will fight against the giants once Ragnarok happens. And these three, I think it's a trilogy, this particular series. These three books kind of go over his attempts to stop Ragnarok from happening. And in this book, the quest is to find the Hammer of Thor, which has been stolen by somebody, and he has to kind of use the connections that he made in that first book to figure out, one, where the Hammer of Thor is, and two, how to get it back from who has taken it. Like I said, I like Magnus Chase as a character. He's just fun to read from his viewpoint because he has this kind of very sarcastic sense of humor as well, kind of like the main character in the last book I read, Lyra. And he is also trying to just protect all his friends throughout the book. He also has a couple of other friends that he goes on these quests with. He goes with the Valkyrie that made him into the warrior, Sam. He also has a dwarf and a elf that he takes along on his travels who help him along his way. So if you're looking to fulfill that Reddit fantasy prompt that says that the book must contain elves or dwarves in them, and they have to be named as such, this book does complete that prompt. It does not complete the hard version of that prompt because they aren't main characters. They are the side characters in Magnus Chase, but it does overall complete the overall prompt. I don't really have any downsides to this book. Like I said, it's just a fun adventure quest. I enjoy the characters. A lot of the world building took place in book 1, so you kind of already know about the 9 worlds and what is happening there. That goes along with the Norse mythology. I really think that's all I got to say about this book. That is our 6th book that we have read for this mythology game, but we also just fulfilled another book off of my June TBR, so yay for that. I'm very happy about that because I've been obviously reading a lot of books not on my TBR in this reading game. But let's go ahead, bring up our game board, and let's go ahead and do our 7th roll. All right, here's our game board. This is where we at. This is where we at. This is where we are. Wow. On the last Mystic Male circle on the board. So let's go ahead and do our 7th roll of the game. Here we go. A 7. Oh my gosh, I was so scared I was going to get a 1. But that means we have completed our mythology reading game for June. And why couldn't we have gotten a 7 earlier on when we were getting all those 1s and 2s? But that's neither here nor there. Oh my gosh, that's neither here or there at this point, because we have officially finished the game, having read 6 books for this game. All right, we did it. We have finally did it. We have finally completed our mythology reading game. At one point, I was pretty sure this game was never going to end. We ended up reading over 2,500 pages. We read 6 books, and we got a good introduction into the world of mythology-inspired books. This was so much fun. I enjoyed every book that I read for this challenge. Let's quickly go through them. We started off with The Witch's Heart, which was the retelling of Loki's story from Agraboda's viewpoint, which was a wonderful retelling if you're interested in the story of Loki. Then we read The Jasmine Throne, which is an epic fantasy based on Indian history, folklore, a little mythology in there as well. Definitely a good book if you're looking for some world building and some more of that epic fantasy type atmosphere. Then we read The Scorpion and the Night Blossom, which is a YA fantasy book inspired by Chinese mythology with some romance in there as well. If you're looking for a book about trials that has a lot of twists in it, this is definitely a book that fulfills that expectation. Then we read The Serpent Secret, which is a middle grade novel based on Bengali folklore with a little bit of mythology thrown in there as well. And that was just a fun, lighthearted, just fun adventure story where the main character has to track down her parents. Then we read The Games Gods Play, which is probably my favorite book that I read during this reading game. It was a Hunger-esque style book where the main character, Lyra, gets chosen by Hades to represent him in the chalice where she has to perform in all these trials. And if she wins, then Hades becomes the king of all the gods. And just the relationship between Hades and Lyra was just a lot of fun to read. I really enjoyed Lyra's sense of humor. And yeah, it was just a fun, quick book to read. Well, quick may not be the right word because it was like over 500 pages, but it was definitely a fun book to read. Definitely looking forward to the next book in that series. Then we finished the reading game with The Hammer of Thor, which is the second book in the Maiden's Chase and Gods of Asgard series based on Norse mythology. And again, just another fun book by Rick Riordan, a middle grade adventure story where the main character Magnus has to chase down the Hammer of Thor with the help of his friends. So that's it. That is our mythology game for the month of June. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed reading it, and I'm very happy that we actually managed to complete it. I wasn't sure there for a while. For July, our monthly reading game is going to be our vacation game, where we read books from different places around the world, depending where the game sends us. So I'm excited for that one. I had a lot of fun when I played it the first time around, and I can't wait to give it a second go. The next couple of videos that will be coming out on this channel will be a color wheel game with a twist that will come out next Friday. And then after that will be, I can't believe I'm saying that, but our July TBR. So I got to get back into my June TBR, see if I can knock some more books off of the long June TBR. And yeah, that's what we have to look forward to for the next couple of weeks. If you enjoyed watching this video, please hit that like button. And if you've watched this video all the way to the end and want to let me know, why don't we put a dragon for my lovely origami dragons that I made for this game. Also, if you've read any of these books that I read during this game, or you have your own favorite mythology-inspired books, please let me know in the comments below as well. If you enjoyed this video and want to see future videos by me, please hit that subscribe button. And otherwise, I will see you guys in my next video next Friday. Take care. Bye!